Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, June 11th Elmhurst Board of Education meeting. The board has been in closed session since 5:30 this evening to discuss employment of employee, pending litigation, negotiations, a discussion of closed session minutes, and of the approval of the May 29th closed session minutes. We have 7 board members present, none absent. The first thing on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just want to take a second to say thank you very much to Mrs. Ebner for conducting the last 2 meetings in my absence. She was elected vice president and then immediately given the chair for 2 consecutive meetings. So Shannon, thank you very much. Next on our agenda is public comments. And I just want to preface this by saying, in the interest of fairness, individuals requesting to address the board during the board meeting are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes. It is not the practice of the board to respond to public comments at the meeting, but issues may be referred to the superintendent for investigation, study, and response, and I want to assure everyone that does speak is that while we don't reply, we do listen carefully. Why don't I call the names 2 at a time, just so you know who's next on deck. And then when you come up to the microphone, I see it is already on. The red light means that it's on. Please state your name and your address. So the first 2, Mary Usher, and forgive me if I mess up the pronunciation of your name. And the second is Jackie Fisher.
Good evening. Can you all hear me? Yep. Yes. My name is Mary Ewer. I live at 3N487 Willow in Elmhurst. I've been an Elmhurst resident since I was 1 year old. Went to Hawthorne, went to Sandburg, went to York. My kids now go to Conrad Fisher and Churchville. And we have a couple of things that I would just like to point out, and that is that there are major changes going on at Conrad Fisher. And as a stay-at-home mom for 12 years, I'm concerned. I would like to know the student-to-teacher ratio at Conrad Fisher per grade and at District 205, if we could have that done. I would also like to address perhaps redistricting if Conrad Fisher is going to go with 1 or 2 classes ELL. I'm not offended by that. I'm not disgusted by that. I think that every student deserves a fair chance. However, if we need to pull from Crestview up to Belden or even up to Fullerton and send them to Field, if we need to take the Addison kids and send them to Emerson, so that every District 205 elementary school has a similar student-to-teacher ratio, that would be fantastic. I would also like to take a look at, if we are running ELL, split classes. When I was in 4th grade at Hawthorne, and trust me, I did very well. I graduated from the University of Illinois in business with a degree in accounting and did very well for myself until I had my children, and then I was a little challenged. But in 4th grade, I had half 4th, half 5th. And they did that to accommodate the class size with what the state and the district would allow teachers per school. So those are my main items. I'm concerned about Conrad Fisher. I think that every child there, whether you speak English, whether you don't speak English, however it works, every child, a 6-year-old deserves a chance. and I get that, but my 6-year-old who speaks English deserves the same chance. Thank you.
Jackie Fisher, and then Pam Hamill.
Hi, I'm Jackie Fisher, 949 South Fairfield, Elmhurst, Illinois. I am here to, first off, thank the city who are here and the engineering firms who are here to present the flooding issues that we face in Elmhurst. I was personally on the Stormwater Task Force Committee, and I'm happy to offer any suggestions or answer any questions that the board should have after this meeting. But I want you to know that our Stormwater Task Force, which was focused mainly on looking at the engineering report prepared by Christopher Burke Engineering, and we evaluated the report looking for to identify opportunities to reduce the risk of overland flooding to Elmhurst in 10 specific areas. So we focused specifically on the integrity of the report and looked at the quality of work that was done and evaluated it for cost versus benefit. And all of the subcommittee's reports and presentations are online and available for you to look at if you go to the city's website. The one thing I would like to say, in addition, is that we were limited in scope in what we could look at. We were not given, our charge was not to come up with our own ideas to solve the stormwater problem. It was specifically to look at the report. I think that there is room within the engineering report where there are other opportunities to look at resolving the problems in Elmhurst. So I want the school district to be aware that questions should be asked. And I know that main proposal is to look at the fields at Madison and Bryan and Jackson schools to put a retention system in, but there are other opportunities to look at. And so I think that as you evaluate this process, as you move forward in making your decisions, that you should consider asking good questions about other solutions as well, instead of just using the fields, because I'm not sure if just doing that solution would really completely solve the issue, and whether it would fully benefit our community as a whole. And so we did encourage the city to reach out to the public, reach out to you and speak, and so I'm very thrilled to have everybody here to do that. But as a representative of the Stormwater Task Force, I feel it's important that you are all aware that we were, the task force did recognize the incredible work that the engineering firm did, but that they had they did not come up with as creative solutions as we had hoped. And so we look to you to ask some good questions so that we make sure that you guys make good decisions for the land use at our schools. I think that's at my time. But I guess lastly, again, we offer our time. There's many people on the task force that are willing to, that were on the task force that are willing to help should questions arise. And you have new information with the 2013 storm events, and that it would be really good to ask Christopher Burke to reevaluate his models, which to see whether or not they are the storm event we had in 2013 matches up with the modeling that they had predicted in 2010 from the 2010 storms. So a lot of good questions to ask, and if you need help, I'm here. So thank you.
Next is Pam Hamill, followed by John Barrow.
Hi, my name is Pam Hamill. Hi, my name is Pam Hamill. Can you hear me now?
Just, now it's on. There we go.
Voila.
All right. My name is Pam Hamill, and I live at 3N 464 North Wilson Street in Elmhurst. And my daughter is a third grader who will be starting again back at Conrad in the August. And I think all of us want what's best for the children, and I think as we have learned more and more about the different ELL programs that are out there, what's a little bit confusing to us is how quickly the school board has moved to make some pretty significant changes that have changed the climate and kind of the complexion of Conrad. I have personally attended 3 different ELL presentations, and it would seem that the board is moving in a direction of dual language, which, having looked at the research and having read and looked into, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, so I'm a little rattled here, but it seems like it's a program that looks really great on paper, but the reality is it is so far on one end of the spectrum that it has caused this absolutely rapid change. The loss of 4 great teachers from the school. I don't know if it's one of those situations where they were either bringing in people who are bilingual, or if they see the writing on the wall that the school is heading in a direction of this sort of dual language program. So I would just ask that time be taken to really investigate what the best options are that are out there. There have been ramifications, like I said, this rapid change in staffing, the parents not really understanding why so many people are leaving and then having lots of questions. I think also, although again, dual language looks really great on paper, this idea has kind of been floated that parents from other elementaries will enroll their kids in Conrad with the expectation that they will learn a second language during their elementary years. And I just think that that's, it's very difficult for me to see a parent on the south side of town enrolling their kid at Conrad when there's a 60% poverty rate. Like I said, it looks good on paper, but the reality is that really a reality? So I would just ask and urge that we move with more caution, that we get facts from the teachers and the people who are in the trenches who see how this is actually being implemented, whether or not on a day-to-day basis the kids are learning, and what those results are. So I guess if I had to sum up, it's just, that we move with caution, that we try to learn about other programs that are out there that are not so far on one end of the spectrum, and that we, I think I just saw the red light go off. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate it.
Mr. Burrell, followed by Hugh Murray.
My name is John Barrett. I live at 468 Oak in Elmhurst. I'm not as informed as I'd like to be on this because I just heard about it. A little disturbed by the loss of the teachers from Conrad Fisher. Everything's going to be random that I say here. I think I've been too aggressive with some people and not others about the residency. I think it's a little too easy to get into Conrad Fisher by showing a lease and a bill. They're very easy to phony up. I hear reports of students being dropped off at Entry Drive in Grand. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard that a lot. I have rental properties in Elmhurst, and I've never been asked for a lease after the first year. And there have been students that go to Conrad Fisher and Churchville. I feel that no one's watching. I know you have to follow federal guidelines, and it's, civil rights, but I feel that my tax dollars should be protected from being spent on non-residents. And that might be all I got. 'cause I got a lot of my questions answered just standing outside with other people who are informed. I just think it should be harder to, or somebody should be watching better, you know, if that's true, that it's that easy to get in. It seems like I found this form on the Illinois State Board of Education website. If the student is not, if the parent, a little frazzled. This form, it seems like you just fill out this form and just say a child lives with you and show them a lease that they can go to our school. I don't know if this is news to anybody, but it's on their Illinois State Board website. But it just has you attest that the student lives with you. So I may be misinformed on that, but I haven't had time to study on much of this, but that's what I know, or that's what I've read. Thank you.
Mr. Murray, followed by Jennifer, and again, forgive me, de Bassiere? My best shot.
Hello, everybody. My name is Hugh Murray. I live at 796 Geneva. My stepson has just completed his second grade at Conrad Fisher. And in the 2 years that he was there, we've seen a drastic change in the way things have been handled. He has a slight impediment with his speech, which he was placed in an ESL for reading program instead of a normal reading learning program. I wonder why that was. I do wonder if there's enough resources due to that fact that a lot of influx of the ELL program is going to create. There's a lot of students out there that have just pretty much swamped Conrad Fisher. I feel that's an issue. I also wonder why the other schools in Elmhurst, 205, don't have this issue, where it's only Conrad. I do believe that there should be a stricter enforcement of enrollment, like the previous gentleman said. He should really do a tougher background check to see if their student actually is within district. Thank you very much.
Jennifer, followed by Bill Sullivan.
Hi again, I'm Jennifer DeBosher, and I live at 3 North, 300 Emroy in Elmhurst. And I want to first state that thank you. I was speaking here a couple weeks ago, and then we received notice that we will be having a meeting June 25th at Fisher. So I appreciate that, where more of our questions will be answered. And if I can please ask people to show a hand if they are concerned about Conrad Fisher at this point. Okay, so I've been doing some research too. I have a son at York. He's going to be a senior, a daughter who's going to be an 8th grader at Churchville, and then a 3-year-old with a late birthday. So I have a few more years until she'll be at Fisher. I want her to go to Fisher. I've been doing some research, like I said, and there's about 30% of Conrad Fisher who are in the Spanish-speaking population. And while you sent us your mission statement and saying that you want to cater, or not cater, but you want to address the concerns of all individuals, I can't help but wonder what happens to the 70% remaining, because I see that as a contrast. When you're hiring more teachers to replace the teachers that we already have, I'm concerned. I'm not bitter, I'm not angry, I'm concerned, and I have a lot of questions. And also, indirectly or directly, as of today, 4.5 teachers now were moved out of Fisher. The speech pathologist and the social worker were indirectly or directly moved, as well as 1.5 resource teachers. That is very abrupt. That's very significant. We really don't understand why. I know Fisher parents have been complacent in the past. I'm one of them. This is because of the decisions that you guys are making. It's not because of anyone at Fisher. I can't help the people that are wanting to move. I don't blame them. There are many people that are wanting to move out of Fisher. There are many people, and this is so sad to say, there are many people that want the AYP scores to show that we haven't made progress, because maybe that way they'll get a transfer. That's so sad for me. okay, to hear that. But that's the reality, and I'm telling you, that's what you will be seeing because I've talked to a lot of people. So, and then we have people who don't want to pay taxes because, well, they have to pay taxes, I'm sorry, but they don't want their kids to go to private schools because they're going to pay taxes as well as a private school tuition. Those are the conversations that they are having. I don't blame them for moving. I considered it myself too with my husband. But you know what's held us at Fisher for so many years is the teachers. And you guys got us where it hurts with the teaching staff. Why on earth would you move so many great teachers when you know the issues that we have at Fisher? You know the poverty levels. Well, you know what? I think I do know I found some answers when I talked to someone at the Illinois State Board of Education, and I talked to someone in the bilingual education program, and I found out that through our Title I funding, 60% of it goes towards, we get reimbursed, the district gets reimbursed, and 60% of it can be used for salaries and for funding. So I'm guessing that was a decision made that wasn't student-centered, as you say in your vision statement, that all decisions are student-centered. I think that was financially driven. And I am asking you guys to please think out of the box. We're asking our teachers and our staff as we move more to Danielson to think out of the box. If they want to be excellent or proficient, they have got to think out of the box. Please think out of the box for our Conrad Fisher students. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan, followed by Judith Barrentos.
I had to write in big type because my eyes are getting worse as I get older. I'm sure we all suffer from that. Let me first thank each of you on the board for your service to our community and to our children. It's not an easy job, and I truly thank you for your service. I'm here tonight to tell you what has gone right at Conrad Fisher. Well before any of you were school board members, and before any of this administration was in our school district, the community of Conrad Fisher was addressing our issues, solving our problems, and seeing results. Since I joined the Conrad Fisher community in 1997, teachers, staff, and the community on the north side of Elmhurst have worked hard to improve the academic performance of Conrad Fisher. Despite many challenges, we are very proud of the steady increase in the academic performance of our ELL children. I have seen our faculty under the leadership of Jane Bailey become some of the best educators in all of Elmhurst. On any team, chemistry can be very elusive. Jane has developed that chemistry between faculty, staff, and parents. We have always been an inclusive community that has valued our diversity and the added education that brings to our children. We at Fisher understand that the administration feels they have a compliance issue that should be addressed in our district. We have always worked together to make necessary changes to improve the academic environment for all of our children. Over my 15 years as part of this community, we have seen tremendous academic growth, especially in our ELL community. In 2012, we graduated 25% of our ELL children out of the program, and in 2013, we graduated 30% of our children, and they are now able to be educated with the rest of their classmates. We accomplished this through our principal, teachers, and parents, all working together with open, honest communication and facing our challenges head-on. We have not always agreed. However, we have welcomed honest debate that has always brought us to a solid educational outcome for our whole community. Unfortunately, this administration has not been completely honest and transparent with this board or the stakeholders in our community. This district has had 4 different ELL coordinators in the past 5 years. All of them have had very different plans to be implemented in our district. They have not communicated with stakeholders, and they have not cared to understand the culture and the educational environment at Conrad Fisher. The teachers, I'm sure, are ready and willing to communicate with this administration. However, it's become clear to me that this administration has fractured the teamwork that is so vital to solving our problems. This administration is content to solve a mandate at the expense of educational success. As a district, we should never be willing to sacrifice education to solve a mandate passed down from some politician and executed by some bureaucrat that has no vested interest in our children. The administration stated in their latest communication, quote, "There is a wealth of data that shows the Model District 205 is following in the best interest of these English language learners. While there will always be individual exceptions, these studies incorporate large sample sizes, thousands of students, and are therefore statistically valid. Unfortunately, the data that has been presented to us has been riddled with cherry-picked statistics and has offered testimony from people that do not reflect the demographic challenges of our community. I'm saddened at how they have approached this problem with such a heavy hand and lack of communication. To our ELL success, Conrad Fisher currently has 210 children in our ELL program. Churchville has 29. What happened to all those children? Well, I'll tell you. The Fisher community educated those children so they graduated out of the ELL program and are able to be educated with their fellow classmates. We're very proud of that fact. Also stated in the last patch article, compliance with the law is not optional. Our charter as a school district comes from the state of Illinois. Therefore, we are an arm of the Illinois State Board of Education and must be in compliance with all rules, regulations, state code, and case law. The district receives both state and federal grant funding, in which we ensure the ISBE that we are carrying out these programs. Any district accepting these funds is subject to these mandates. These funds are used at Conrad Fisher to provide instructional material, parent support programs, and supplemental materials for students in the program. This administration has openly said that the current program that they wish to implement will lower our test scores at Fisher, with a hope that the student will perform better later in their academic career, thus causing us to not make AYP and causing us to lose our funding. Or, if we do not implement this mandate, we may lose our funding. It sounds to me that either direction, we may ultimately lose our funding. I fail to see why we care to be compliant with a mandate that clearly has big flaws, and we ultimately lose our funding. We can do better. Lastly, I would like to ask this administration to stop the rhetoric of bigotry and division. This administration's continual soft accusation that this community is not teaching to all of our children is not accurate and offensive. Our ELL students have been very successful at Conrad Fisher, and we take pride in serving all of our children. We have already started to see unintended consequences from this administration's approach to solving their compliance issue. I'm not here to tell you that I have the solution. However, I will tell you we can come up with a better one working together. I'm asking this board to slow down. Ask harder questions. Ask harder questions of the administration, the principal, the teachers. Truly bring all the stakeholders into this conversation. I'm sure we can come up with an answer that will solve this compliance issue without hurting our educational success and continuing to fracture our community. Thank you.
Judith, followed by Mike Jasek.
Hi, sorry. Hi, my name is Judith Barrientos. I live at 823 North Willow Road in Elmhurst. And I have a copy of my questions that I submitted with my little blue card. So I'm going to try to go through this as fast as I can, as I know that this is way more than 3 minutes. My first question is, according to the new laws requiring Illinois teachers to obtain certification in bilingual instruction or English as a second language in addition to early childhood education by 2014, in your letter pertaining to the board's May 29th meeting, it states, quote, where 11 teachers enrolled in coursework so that eventually all primary teachers would have their English as a second language or ESL endorsement, end quote. Why were the teachers that were at Conrad Fisher moved? If they're certified and endorsed, there's no need for moving them, obviously. Number two is, under the new regulations, school officials must determine whether students speak another language at home and evaluate how well they speak and comprehend English. How is the district determining this? I read complaints online where parents are accusing Fisher of racial profiling. Can you dispel or explain these parents' accusations? I know it can't be just from someone's last name or their heritage, because me, I'm 100% Latina, grew up speaking Spanish first language, learned English, and obviously everyone understands me. Went through the school system, no ELL, no ESL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In 2012, this is my third question. The superintendent stated that district-wide poverty was at 13.5, and now it's close to 60%. According to the 2012 budget approved by the school board members, receives $430,000 in Title I funds for low-income students at Fisher and Churchville. Title I's only supposed to be on those children living in poverty. But since Fisher has surpassed the X threshold of 40%, now they can apply for a full Title I school funding. But what I don't understand is, how did it go from 13.5% to almost 50% more in 1 year? How does that happen, you know? Sorry, I'm a little nervous, so that's why I'm a little shaky. Question number 4. According to the rebuttal to a parent's complaints on May 29th, Fisher principal Jan Bailey was part of an original core team, but according to your website that I looked up today just to make sure, elmhurst205.org-ELL, quote, currently we are in the process of forming a core team to attend a 3-phase workshop, a perfect match. Continue to visit the webpage for the latest information and updates on ELL programming, end quote. How is it that we're having these discussions right now and your website isn't updated? We have no idea what's going on. Who is the rest of the core team? I only know Jan Bailey's on it, but who else is on it? What were the workshops about? We don't know anything that's going on. And that's a problem that I have, because goes to my question number 5. I found out about all these situations happening right now through eTalk on Facebook. That's ridiculous. I should be finding out from Elmhurst. Is that a minute timer? And so I was thinking maybe there's, if everyone's finding out things through Facebook, maybe we should all have a Conrad Fisher Facebook page so that we can have an open forum and have open dialogue between parents, teachers, and staff. Because obviously, as big as Conrad Fisher is, I really feel that there should be more parents here. They probably don't even know what's going on. And my second to last question, sorry. District 205's early entrance program, my daughter missed the cutoff by 3 days. My father-in-law is a current school psychologist for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. He also is a former supervisor of psychological service for the county. And along with him and other professionals and lawyers, he was researching for me that basically Elmhurst early entrance for kindergarten is unreliable, invalid, and discriminatory. The Elmhurst standards for early entrance are not supported by the NAEYC, which is the National Association for Education of the Young Children, and you're charging $1,000 per student per test to take this test that supposedly a 4-year-old is supposed to pass, thinking that they're 7-year-olds. I don't know how a 4-year-old is going to pass a 7-year-old test. So I feel that's unacceptable. I feel that I'm taken advantage of. Now my daughter's going to private school, which I didn't expect. I moved to Elmhurst for the school district. And I want why this method was chosen, explain, and why. And lastly is, I read a lot of complaints online about the bullying at the schools, and I want to know what the district's anti-bullying protocol is, because I feel like a lot of parents are complaining that nothing's being done, and I really hope that that's not the case. Thank you.
And Mike Jasek.
Thank you very much. Mike Jasek, 748 South Washington. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening as a resident of Washington Street and the voice of many families on that street. We ask the board strongly to consider the plan brought forth by the village tonight that was proposed by Christopher Burke for the flooding. As I sit in this audience and I hear all these parents concerned about their children, the flooding issue should not be the main concern of the school board. You should be concerned with dealing with our children. But as a civil engineer and a project manager currently building a flood control facility, I can tell you the Burke plan works. The plan, is a win for the school district that will get brand new state-of-the-art athletic fields. It's a win for the families that will get to use these new fields, as well as give these families the peace of mind that our homes will not flood again. Thank you.
Now, that is all the blue sheets that I was given. Is there anybody in the audience that submitted a blue sheet that somehow didn't get to me? Please, bring it up. Thank you. If you could just state your name and your address at the beginning.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Servando Cedillo. I live on 840 North Eastland Street in Elmhurst. I would like to thank all the parents for coming out tonight. I greatly appreciate your support. Email is a powerful tool. Communication is very powerful as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for the board for sending out a response to the meeting that we had, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and all the information as well. So thank you very much for that. It gives me a better understanding of what's going on and so forth. For me, a lot of kids, they're fast learners. They're like a sponge. So I think by separating kids out of the normal classroom environment is actually going to prolong their learning experience in regards to English. A lot of these kids, they speak English already, in the playground, in the afternoons, at home with their friends and so forth. So I think by us putting them into a Spanish class, especially where teachers are always speaking Spanish, from what I'm hearing, I physically, go to the school and I hear the teachers, all they do is speak in Spanish. Sometimes, unfortunately, I go to the school and the receptionists, they'll speak to me in Spanish where I prefer to be spoken in English as well. But I think by us providing this course is going to prolong the learning process, and we're basically giving them a wrong message in regards to, it's okay to speak a different language, even though I think there should be a fast track program. I think this program is actually going to prolong the learning experience. One thing that I did notice on the report that was sent out by the board, in 2008, EIL students was 211. 2009 was 175. 2010, it jumped to 374. 2011, 476. I don't know why. In my community, I don't see that big of an increase. And the increase has been in the last 2 years. So where is it coming from? Is it a specific area? Is it students coming from outside the district? I don't know the answer to that, but I would like some help to get an answer for that as well. So that, typically it's been around 150 to 200. How come all of a sudden in 2 years it's 476? Okay, but once again, thank you very much for the board, and thank you very much for all the parents for the support for coming out tonight. Thank you.
Next on our agenda is the superintendent's communication. Mr. Purnell.
Yes, the next item is the city stormwater flood plan, and I would like to introduce Jim Grabowski, who is the city manager for the city of Elmhurst, who has brought a team here today.
And let's just move back to public comments. Sorry we missed you.
Thank you for your time. In 2012, we built a new home in Southwest Elmhurst. And we moved in January of this year. And on April 18th, we had 8 feet of water in our brand new basement. Despite this challenge, overall we feel that Elmhurst is a good place to live and raise our kids. But if these flooding issues don't get rectified, that might not be the case. I personally spoke with residents in Downers Grove near Washington Park that said their stormwater reservoir redirected a lot of water that would have otherwise been in the streets and in their homes. As the first speaker said, this might not be the only way to solve this issue, but I feel that any reduction in stormwater would improve our community and lessen the threat to our foundations of our homes. As a resident, I feel that it was important to come out tonight to show my support for these initiatives. Thank you.
If you could do me one more favor and just state your name and your address, that would be great.
Joellen Haskey, 625 South Sailor. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is there anybody else we missed? All right, then we'll move on to Superintendent's communication. Mr. Pernod, Mr. Grabowski.
Yes, again, I would like to introduce Mr. Grabowski, City Manager for the City of Elmhurst, and his team. They are kind enough tonight to come to the Board of Education meeting and do a presentation about the Stormwater Plan and answer questions that the board has submitted to Jim and his team at the last board meeting. So with that, Jim, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good evening, President Collins, members of the school board, Superintendent Pernod, staff, and residents. On behalf of the mayor and city council, thanks for the invitation to come before you tonight and discuss the concept plans for stormwater mitigation. As Superintendent Pernod said, Jim Grabowski, the city manager for Elmhurst. With me tonight is Mike Hughes, our Public Works Director, Chris Burke from Christopher Burke Engineering, and also from Christopher Burke Engineering, Doug Gotham and Luke Sherry. All team members who have worked on these projects all along here. As you know, we've been looking at these projects for some time, and in fact, our study started after the devastating storms of 2010. Elmhurst is in need of improvements for our stormwater system. The study we had done by Christopher Burke Engineering demonstrates this significant need. The parcels which we will discuss tonight are some of the only open space in Elmhurst. And tonight we hope to answer all of your questions regarding the proposed projects and continue our partnership to work together and improve the quality of life for the residents of Elmhurst. We have a brief presentation for you from Christopher Burke and Doug Gotham. And we're going to hand out a letter which answers the 40-some questions which were sent to us last week. After the presentation, we're happy to have discussion and answer any additional questions that you may have. And as Mrs. Fisher commented earlier, tonight we're only talking about a piece of the puzzle in the long-term solution to our stormwater issues. With that, Christopher Burke.
Thank you, Jim. My name's Chris Burke, and we've had the pleasure of working on this project, working with staff. I won't go through the entire presentation that we made in December of 2011 that described the details, but let me summarize that by talking about the fact that we were hired in 2010, and at that first meeting, I mentioned that the way to address these types of problems is to use open space that where you're taking water that is flooding residential properties and placing it at a location where it can be temporarily stored and then emptied out. So in order to do that, we developed a detailed model that simulates what happens in all these areas. And the city staff identified 10 flood-prone areas for us to study. The locations of those areas are shown on that exhibit in yellow. What we did, we early on, as I said, we identified these locations to take the storage. We looked at these areas in southwest Elmhurst. That obviously is a very flood-prone area, susceptible to flooding. What we would do is create a situation where stormwater from these areas is sent via pipes into these green spaces. Green spaces are lowered. We can't just tell the water to go there uphill. We need to create an area for the water to be temporarily parked. Remember, water has to flow downhill in order to drain out. And one of the problems that you're going to see in southwest Elmhurst is water flows downhill to low-lying areas. It can't get out because the storm sewers are filled, and it starts piling up, entering homes, and as you heard from the last speaker, flooding those homes, and including their basements. So one of the things we looked at three things. We looked at putting these parks and open spaces in, excavating them down so they drain by gravity. That is, the water comes in. When the water can come out, because the sewer has capacity, it goes out. That's contrasted to a pump evacuated basin. That means it's much deeper than the pipe that it drains into, so you have to pump out the area after the storm event. That takes energy, but more importantly, it holds the water in that area retains it longer than a gravity drained facility. The third option that we talked about in our report to frame the problem was to look at putting it underground, putting it in vaults, putting it in areas where you would temporarily store the water and let it drain out. It would not be, you still would have to excavate out that space, put in the storage, these underground storage areas, and let the water drain out. So that's the third way. There are other ways of doing it, as you've heard people say, and as Manager Grabowski said, there are other ways of storing it, all of which have a greater price tag. So certainly we could excavate out an area, put in aggregate, and then put grass over it, and that would have about a third or 40% of the storage you would have if you had an open space. So what we've done is we bracketed in our analysis the different options and the different costs associated with those. Flood storage volume. We use terms called acre foot, because everybody thinks that we know what a foot deep is, and we have some idea of what an acre of land is. So we believe that that's and engineers use it. It's also because it's in a unit of measurement and a number that we can get our arms around. Contrasted to me telling you that we needed 10 million gallons or 20 million gallons. It's a meaningless item. So give you an idea of what 1 acre foot is, that number of gallons, 325,000 plus gallons, almost 6,055 gallon rain barrels. Okay, and 616,000 liter bottles, and just to give you an idea, at the upper end is the Elmhurst Quarry, which has about 8,300 acre feet of land. So when you look at this, we simulated during the 2010 and more recently 2013 event, and there's almost 80 acre feet of water that's sitting in the low-lying areas of Elmhurst. And if the flood control or stormwater management is to be effective, we have to find a location for 80 acre feet of water so that the residents that are flood prone are not susceptible to that. So this is what it looks like. This is showing the south side. This is about 36 acre feet. Once again, that's the reason why I'm using these numbers, because everything in blue is the flood-prone areas, the areas susceptible to flooding. And so, well, this is simulated, and this shows you on the north side, another 12 acre feet in the center, 10 acre feet on your left, and 8 acre feet on your right. So these are some of the flood-prone areas. Residents have attended many meetings at the city, and we've talked to many of the residents, and we looked at different options in our report. This gives you an idea of the different flood-prone areas, the number of homes that are flooded according to different frequencies, and you have in excess of 300 homes susceptible to flooding in the 100-year event. We looked at alternatives to control that flooding, to address that problem, and we looked at needing 65 acre feet in alternative one. There's a menu of different options, some of which are more feasible than others. You can't just send the problem downstream. I think everybody, the city would be concerned if someone was doing it upstream of us on Salt Creek, and likewise the downstream communities would have the same concern for waters flowing down to them. So we're limited in this particular case, this alternative, to locating potential areas for storing water. So you can see how we partitioned up the storage, and in this case we're able to get about half of the homes out of the threat of flooding. Even by doing this, so to frame the discussion about the severity of the problem, and some of you have seen people talk about this, if we provided that volume of storage in those areas or in other ways, you would still have about half the homes that would be susceptible to flooding, some type of flooding from the 100-year inundation. So we also looked at other options, and that includes pumping additional water into the creek. That creates a big price tag because we've got to find other land outside the corporate limits to create storage. So if we don't create storage within the corporate limits of Elmhurst, you've got to find other land downstream to create the storage. So it doesn't, the issue of providing storage still exists wherever you are able to place it. So then that's obviously a significant cost. So what did we do? In the report that we prepared in 2011, we came up with these concept plans, and that's on the left-hand side. That shows you that we had a high water, a lower water, and showing that how much storage could be achieved on the different scenarios that I've described. On the right-hand side, we've met with the staff. We've taken in consideration the needs of each one of these sites and looked at ways of incorporating the current use into a number of site plans. So we went from the left-hand side over to the right-hand side and refined that. We have better visuals to describe how we could accommodate the existing use. 3 of the site plans you're about to see presented by Doug Gotham are gravity drained. The last one is a pumped out site. So these are all designed for water flowing in, water flowing out, under drain system being placed there to accelerate the drain time and the allowing these fields to become more usable in a shorter period of time. So at this point in time, I'd like to have our landscape architect, Doug Gotham, to come up and show the various site plans that he's developed.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. My task as the landscape architect was dual. First, I had to satisfy the stormwater requirements that the city was looking for to achieve on each of the sites. And the second was to maintain the site's quality for the entire community, for the school district, for how the school district uses the site, and then also as the neighbors and the residents perceive the site. I mean, it's open space, so it has an aesthetic value to the community beyond the school. So we just didn't want to build basins out there. We wanted to have a purpose beyond stormwater, but also fulfill that. Now, as Chris said, these are only temporary holding facilities. To make you understand that better, water will only be diverted into them at high water or high storm events. At that time, the water will then gravity drain out. And we don't see these lasting any longer than 2 days at the maximum. And that would be a very severe event. In fact, if it lasted beyond that, the fields would not be usable for athletic purposes. The grass would die. Now, we've done this before on other locations. Specifically, as someone said, the Washington Park site in Downers Grove, you can go see it. They experienced the same event in April as you did, obviously, and they were using the fields the following Sunday. What you see on this first slide is the Madison Street School. In the upper right-hand corner there along Washington Street is where the water would flow in. We've accommodated a soccer field you can see in the center of the site, and then the water would flow out in the lower left-hand corner down on Bryan Street. So what we were able to do here is maintain the full-size field, and you can see in the profile there that we have a 4-to-1 side slope. So that's what you would see on Bryan and Washington, so it's not a severe basin. It's mowable. Even a residential person, a homeowner could mow that side slope. We would have it under drain so that the field wouldn't hold water. There wouldn't be any mosquito issues. Once it dries down, it would be a normal grass field. And we were able to accommodate the full-size soccer field that you see there, or 2 smaller fields running north-south. And we would have a handicap accessibility coming from the parking lot to the north there, and it would ramp down. Now, we show in the picture there that is surrounded by a perimeter fence, which is there currently. So that's Madison. Let's see the next one. This one is Jackson, thank you. I saw Madison up there for a moment. Jackson is a situation, again, where we're trying to accommodate the soccer fields, but here the water would flow in off of Jackson. It would overtop the curb and then come into the open space. And you can see this is much shallower than Madison. Madison, we have to accommodate what level the water's coming in at on the street sewers and what level it's going out at. Same thing with Jackson. Here it's coming in from the top. It's not coming in through a pipe, but it will have to leave from a pipe, which you see in the upper left-hand corner there. Again, we can get a soccer field on there, full size, or two smaller youth size running north and south. We have it fully turfed. You can see the very shallow profile, and again, that would also be under drain. You might not even notice this basin at all. It would still have a full grass effect. It'd hardly look different than what it does today, just a little bit lower. Next slide, please. Very good. Now, Bryan, we looked at the same way. The stormwater flows in from the upper left off of Bryan, comes into the facility, and then exits at the lower left, going south towards Butterfield down there. We recognize the fact that you have two full-size softball fields on there, so we accommodate that, and there's actually some room for accommodation along the side there for the little track events that you have for the middle school. But in this situation, you can see we lowered the fields, and you can see the profile again. Here we have the 4-to-1 side slopes, and then we accommodated the full-size softball fields, which I understand the Lady Dukes just took fourth, so good for you guys. But we would accommodate them, and I think we can actually improve that field. We can have a good playing surface. We can get the best catcher to backstop distance, you know, the ideal distance. I think now it's a little crowded than what it should be. We can actually create a nice brick backstop. We can elevate the seating on the perimeter for the spectators and actually have dugouts for the team on either side and accommodate that right into the side slope. You can see on the lower right there we have a nice plaza, concrete plaza behind the backstop, and we show shelter, and then we also have an ADA accessible ramp going down the softball field. But there again you can see it has the nice gentle side slopes and be fully under drain. And the last one. This is the gravel lot that occurs immediately south of the softball field on Bryan. What we're looking here is, as Chris mentioned, would be a pump evacuated site. We would literally dig a massive hole down, approximately 30 plus feet down. The water would come in off of Bryan, off the upper left there, and then have to be evacuated, pumped out, which is, as Chris mentioned, it's a slower process. Because in all these gravity features, like I said, one day in most events, those fields would drain down, much like it did in Downers Grove on April 18th. But this one would have a perimeter fence behind it. It would be a fully excavated situation. We'd have a mechanical building and a pump building there and a diesel generator to back it up. But you can see the ramifications to the site. But it would service and provide 23-acre storage feet for the community. So as briefly, I didn't want to take up a lot of time. Those are the sites. Jim, you want to say something else?
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Doug. So where do we go from here? Big question. There are other sites that are involved that we'll be talking to the Park District about as well. You've probably read about it in the press or perhaps even seen the displays. We'll be at the Park District meeting tomorrow night explaining the same situation, different sites. Mayor Morley will be sending President Collins a letter shortly requesting a small group similar to our school park city group be appointed to have a more detailed discussion about this if the school board sees fit to do that. We would look forward to the board's positive response on that and continue this discussion as we move along to answer questions and hopefully continue that partnership, develop an intergovernmental agreement to detail how each or any of these sites are built, maintained throughout the years. With that, I'm going to hand out, as I mentioned before, a a letter to the superintendent replying to the questions that were asked last meeting, I believe. And I do have a few extra copies here for the staff as well, and those will be posted on our website shortly. We've had a number of inquiries from the press over the questions, and they were public questions. There's no secrets, but we just kind of finished those up today, polished them so that we could bring them here tonight. With that, I would ask the staff that are with me and consultants to come up, and we can answer questions that the school board may have.
Thank you. This group is never shy of comments and questions. If people have some at the tip of their tongue, otherwise I wrote down a few notes. If you want me to start, I'm happy to do so. Otherwise, if somebody else wants to start, you're welcome to do so. I guess people are pointing at me. Okay. We've had, how many 100-year flood of events have we had since January 1st, 2010? Is 3 the right number? Good.
Well, that's a deceiving statistic that the engineers use. I would ask, actually, Dr. Burke to explain that because we have had a number of them.
Right.
He can explain what it actually means.
Okay, I'll make this very quick because I teach at the UIC Water Resources and have for a number of years, and it's not an easy concept. But let's just say that the 100-year storm event has a 1% chance of occurring each and every year. Those of you that happen to play the lottery or go to the casino know your chances are not even close to that of winning. So my point here is that it's 1% chance. Certainly we no longer refer to a specific event as a 100-year because we're looking at it the 2008, 10, 11, and now 13. It used to be that we talked about the 86 and 87 event being the ones that hit Elmhurst the hardest. Now we have more current events. So it's certainly, we know that we're seeing changes in weather patterns. We're not seeing as much overbank flooding, but we're seeing strange things happening, and we need to protect ourselves against those phenomena.
Those 1% events, if we had 3 of them, is that the right number, or 4, 2, something like that?
Actually, if I could, again, I'm Mike Hughes, Director of Public Works. Been with the city since 1985. So as Chris alluded to, I saw the 87, I saw the 96, and in 2005, Elmhurst in this area was considered an extreme drought. And in 2006, October 3rd was the first one. It was 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009. We had an inch and a half of rain in February on snow with frozen ground. Not the 100-year, but we had flooding all over the place. And the 2 in 2010, which well exceeded the 100-year, and then the April one of 2013, which also exceeded the 100-year. So we have probably had 5 or 6 at or above the 100-year since 2006.
Okay, thank you. So in one of those events, how long, what's your anticipated duration that these fields would be unusable for, either playground activities or organized team sporting events?
I'll take a shot at this and say that each one has a finite capacity. If it exceeds it, obviously the water will go elsewhere into the streets. As Doug had said earlier, a day or two, Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, day or two, if you consider it full, it would be drained and playable. The field in Downers Grove that I referred to, Washington Park, was full on the 18th of April, which was Thursday and Friday. Kids were using it on Sunday.
Okay, so
that particular site actually drained down in a day.
Okay, so we're looking at, realistically, in an event where it were to be full, 2, maybe the 3rd day, we could use it again.
Yes.
Okay, all right. You've addressed my Brian gravel lot question. That would be an alternative to the playing fields, right? Not an addition to, but an alternative to, or? do I have that?
Well, you could say alternative two, in my opinion, if some is good, more is better.
Okay.
In terms
So
of
it could
detention.
be, I mean, you could be proposing it as an addition to.
It could be. It
Okay.
could be, yes.
Okay. Now, we had a speaker during public comments say, you know, what you're going to see tonight are the cheapest solutions. There are more expensive solutions that would provide alternatives. Can you kind of highlight what those might be?
As I concluded in my comments, this is a piece of the puzzle here. Because what we saw, as Director Hughes mentioned, the storms that he has seen, what we've presented tonight and what we will present to the Park District tomorrow night can't hold that amount of water. Our system was not built for that. So we're looking at alternatives, which include private stormwater stormproofing. What we'd like to do with these concepts is to kind of shrink the area that's inundated. At that lowest elevation, there's still going to be some homes that are taking on water. There's a possibility of working with those homeowners individually, flood-proofing them, other options that are there. You know, I don't want to get too far out ahead of talking to the council about individual property buyouts, but that's a tool in the toolbox. As the Burke report indicated and Chris mentioned earlier, underground detention was looked at, but the cost of it is anywhere from 3 to 10 times, 6 times, 6 to 10 times more expensive. So these are definitely the most cost-effective solutions. And that's why we'd like to talk to the board about that first, to see if that would be an acceptable proposal.
So let me, it's kind of the bigger picture. I mean, the school board recognizes that our first priority is to our students, the safety of our students that we're charged with, the usability of our fields, but we also recognize that we are part of a larger community and that every governmental unit in Elmhurst, our primary responsibility should be making this community a better place. So those are the questions that I had off the top of my head. If we can just move down the line.
I had a similar question too. At the last meeting, we saw 3 conceptual drawings and now there's 4. I was under the impression that the gravel lot would take the place of the conceptual drawing for the softball field. So is it more now? I mean, it went from 3 to 4, so I'm just a little surprised at that. And then we talked about, I don't know if it was captured in the questions, if we need to add on to our buildings and we need this space to build classrooms, how would that be handled? I mean, do you own the property? Are we still on the property? So at some point we could build on that property. I'm just throwing out some of the questions that I haven't heard the answers. The liability, will you be liable for this property? If there's any kind of injury or accident, are you liable? A lot of these answers say, check with your insurance carrier, check with your insurance carrier. So we need to really work out that piece. That's a huge piece. And, you know, I just picked out one of the concepts, Jackson Field. Was it right? It contained 3 acre-feet? 3 acre-feet. Well,
I believe that's correct.
the problem in the Jackson area is you need 36 acre-feet. So I just don't want to give a sense of false security to our residents. This is just a small, small piece of the puzzle that people think it's a silver bullet sometimes, because we had public speakers at our last meeting come and say, if you don't do this, this is a domino effect. If you don't do this, nothing can be solved. This is what we have to do. This is going to solve the problem. And they live, they don't live exactly adjacent to these fields. So it's just, there's still a lot of questions that I have that I guess you're right. We need to sit down and have conversations, because it can't really be answered, on a piece of paper. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. So, I mean, I welcome those conversations. There's just so many questions that it's hard to, we're getting pressure, but there's so many questions that we kind of need to slow down and really look at the issues and show what percentage of the problem this is going to solve.
Would you like me to respond, President Collins? Not individually to each question, just in general, I'd like to make a statement that.
Yeah, please.
I appreciate the pressure that you're feeling. We're feeling the same pressure, which is why we're here tonight to ask you to consider this. We hope that what we handed out tonight will answer most of the questions. I agree that there are a number of details to be worked out. We're fortunate, certainly in our industry, that there are no secrets. So we have the Downers Grove intergovernmental agreement that the Park District and the city or the village have together. We're going to comb through that, and we think something very similar would be adopted between the city and the school to answer all those questions and take care of those issues.
I just have one last thing. When you talk about Downers Grove, that keeps getting brought up. Washington Park. Where has this been done next to a school? Can you give us an example of where this has been done next to a school? Sorry.
Yes, we found a number of examples. Glenbrook North, Wheaton Christian Grammar School, Wayne Elementary, Greenbrier School, and Union Elementary. And where I come from previously, I know that there's a number of examples out there as well where retention ponds, detention, and there are ponds that are wet 365 days a year that have been built, and fortunately there's no incidents. Obviously there's safety issues that you can take into account, and I think that we can work through any of those issues with the board to address that.
I'm not going to repeat any of the questions about safety, cost, usability, but I am going to continue on with the example of the schools. So if I look at page 7, answers to question number 38, that you referenced all the schools, how do they compare to any one of the 3 or 4 sites that you presented tonight?
We'll follow up and get information on how they compare.
Yeah, we can get site plans, some kind of mapping to show you.
And how long have they been
how they're
around
laid out.
as solutions for flooding?
Some up to 10 years.
So they've been doing well for the 2006, 8, 10, and 13, yeah?
We'll find out exactly
Okay.
when they were constructed to give you an idea.
All right.
But you must remember, as Mike was saying, those events happened in Elmhurst. That's not uniform for the entire state of Illinois.
And completely understand, and therefore, with your expertise, we would like to have a sense of, given these scenarios, this is how it would be different for Elmhurst, right? And this is what you can expect.
Right.
Otherwise, it means nothing to have those as comparisons.
Right. That's why we point to the Downers Grove project, because it was so recent and so close that you can quickly look at it and see it and talk to those residents.
Right. But understand that it's different from a liability standpoint and a cost, because we're in education, right? And then we've got schools where we've got students in these properties all the time. So, we have to really, we're responsible, understand that we want to work with the city, right? This is our community. It's, you look at it in totality. At the same time, we have to be good stewards for education. I'm not going to elaborate on all the other questions.
I want to thank you guys for coming. We really appreciate it. And I think it's a community where everybody comes together, and I think that message was pretty consistent a couple weeks ago on all levels of this school board, or the school organization. I appreciate this. I'm going to take this home. I'm going to spend a little time with this. I'd like to get your PowerPoint as well and kind of integrate. There's a lot to absorb, and I'm sorry if I'm going to be asking some of the questions here, but the way I kind of look at this is you like to see how the proposal that has been suggested fits into the big plan and how all the pieces come together. And I did spend a little more time before this meeting than when we formulated these questions with your program, Dr. Burke, and appreciate it. It's very interesting. First, with the Bryan gravel lot, did you say that's in lieu of the softball field, or is that an additional capacity that you'd like to be met from that which was included in the original 2012 report?
Well, the gravel pit option holds the most of all the sites. I don't want to tell you that we're not interested in the softball site if this doesn't work for some reason.
What was the acre feet of this concept? Just
23
acre feet. And the softball fields is how much?
17 acres.
So this actually totally subsumes the entire softball field capacity if it was in lieu of. But obviously, you're trying to reach as many houses as you possibly can, and if this program only reaches half the houses, I can understand why you'd want to reach as many as possible. Okay, I understand that. The other thing that I'm wondering about is how this problem is continuing. And I was really interested in that part of your report that talked about the code changes that would go along and how new development has had impact on what happens here. And I guess if I'm not wrong, it seems like new development continues apace, and with each new residence, based on the averages you had in your report, the situation's getting a little bit worse, incrementally worse with each new, and I don't know the magnitude of that, but I'm just curious as to what the status of the code changes, just the prospective code changes, not the ones that are going to try to retrofit homes, but the prospective code changes. What's the status of that? That I thought there were some very specific code provisions suggested by Dr. Burke in the report. I think pages 61 and 62 that talked about 3 specific code changes. I'm wondering what the status of those prospective code changes are.
Let me go back and answer your question about the new homes first. We did have Burke take a look at, I believe, 16 random permits throughout town. This is back in 2010, to see the impact of new building versus existing houses. And on average, as you indicated, it was a very small increase in impervious surface. If you think of an existing house from the 1950s or 60s, you have the home, you have the separate garage, you have the driveway that runs the length of the lot, any patio, whatnot. So we looked at that being replaced by a new house with an attached garage, shorter driveway, and it was within 2%, 3% of an increase. Now, on the other hand, the systems inside the house are improved in overhead plumbing and better off overall improvements for the home. Older homes generally don't have overhead plumbing. They have more sanitary backups. They have more footing tiles that are connected to our storm sewer. So it's a mix. With regard to the code changes that were recommended, our Public Works Committee met last night, coincidentally and timely, and obviously they've been talking about these. There's a number of pieces that are going to go into this to help resolve it. This was the priority. A sanitary sewer project in the southwest area of town was a project. Public Works Committee is dealing with both the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer. Two separate issues. A few months ago, the council approved at the Public Works Committee's recommendation a $6 million sanitary project that's going to affect 2,300 homes in that southwest portion of town. What it's going to do, it's going to take some of the load off the system in big storms, move it to a holding tank to be treated afterwards. So last night, they continued the discussion of policy changes. I believe they were making a recommendation to the City Council for check valves, which was one of the recommendations of the task force, which Ms. Fisher indicated earlier. They are also talking about, I'm sorry, Mike, what was the second item?
They would be disconnecting the council.
Disconnecting downspouts for new construction. That's another one. They were asking for some additional information so that they can make a decision on that and a recommendation to City Council.
And the other hot one is the impervious line cover, lot cover.
And then percentage of lot coverage is the third policy issue that they're discussing.
You're right in terms of total impervious, but it's the direct connection to the storm sewer that is the big thing. And what Mr. Burke identified was there's a 32% increase of direct connection water, where the water goes immediately into the storm system as opposed to being detained on there. And every house that does that reduces the use of a school district property incrementally, however small it is. But it's this continuing progression of that increasing that has not been addressed. And I appreciate those other things too, but they don't really directly affect what the school district does, which is, provide fields for school use. This is about the kids. So I guess what I'd like to see is I'd like to see everybody working together, carrying their weight and their proportional weight on this. I mean, these basins on playing surface, which will, maybe a day, maybe two, prevent their use, will be, that's water that came from somewhere else. And to the extent that there is a proposal out there to share the burden of detaining that water, I think that's something that's very important that we'd like to see as a part going forward. And I see two different issues there. One is, getting people to change what they already have, and the other is moving forward. And so from my perspective, I want to move forward and look at, plans and proposals, but I'd also like to see that there's progress going forward on those other things, because I'd like to make sure that, everybody's pitching in, everybody's pulling their weight on this. It seems like that is kind of a stop the bleeding issue. Let's not increase the impact, and it sounds like we've got reminder going on outside right now that we have serious stormwater issues here in town. And I'd like to see some progress on that, stopping the bleeding before we discuss these, well, not before, while we're discussing these longer range. So that's important to me, because these fields, it will involve a reduction in their use for the kids. And as Shannon also identified, they will involve a reduction in flexibility in the future, however this is done. That's just one important issue to me. But you said 80 acre feet is needed entirely for the southwest area, which is the sole area that involves us. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And of that 80, the initial proposal for the 3 fields was how many feet? How many acre feet?
25.
25. And this could potentially, depending on how it is with trade-offs and things like that, add to that 25. Just see. And the intention is that, just to be clear, the city is asking for the use of district land without cost, and the proposal is that in return, it would be a cost-free to the district in terms of maintenance, in terms of liability, in terms of insurance premiums, because obviously when you insure a flat field, I'm assuming your premium is lower than when you have detention in there. I mean, is that the outline of the intergovernmental agreement that you'd like to model after from Downers Grove?
I've not gotten to review it to that detail yet.
Okay.
So those are all things that we would hope to talk about in a smaller group to work those issues out.
All right. In the report, there was an alternative about increasing pumping and then provided you can find compensatory storage somewhere else, and I guess there are issues with it already being spoken for from other projects. I'm wondering, are those alternatives that would reduce the need for detention but increasing the pumping, are those still feasible? Are those still on the table?
They're always on the table, but identifying open space where you can locate those in other communities is even an order of magnitude more difficult than providing open space for the storage within your own community. My experience has shown.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to go over all this, but I appreciate your hearing at least my personal concerns and the rest of the board, and we really appreciate your coming tonight. We are contributors to this community. Community is what makes this school system work, and that involves responsibilities as well as benefits, and we recognize that. Thank you.
Good evening. Similar concept, and I'm going to put it more in conceptual format. And I guess at first I should always say thank you. Thank you to coming. Thank you for the community for sitting and listening through and helping us resolve all our issues, whatever the issue may be. I heard you mention this is a piece of the puzzle. And so I guess what would be helpful for me, it is helpful sometimes to step back and I need to see the entire puzzle, the entire landscape, if you will, no pun included, the entire landscape so I can understand how these pieces all fit together. So I guess that's the gist of my questions. I heard, or I understand that there are things that, obviously, that the city is doing. There's requests from the schools. There's requests from the park districts. And there's also requests from our community members. What I'd like to try to understand is the process on how making all those pieces fit together. And my question is, what's the effect on this total plan if any piece of that puzzle does not come to fruition? So trying to understand how those different pieces play together and what's the plan for implementation on, do we have to have all the pieces in place before we start, or exactly, more information on that. And that'll probably be discussed in that smaller team meeting. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Is that your answer? Have we discussed it then?
Well, I believe she's deferring that to the smaller group, so I just assume wait for that.
Yeah, I guess one of the benefits of sitting at the end of the table is most of the questions get asked before it gets to you. So you've answered a lot of questions on utility, and we do have the small group to fall back on with some of the details. Two questions. One, Doug, in those drawings, safety is, I guess, one of the prominent concerns. You've heard that at the table in here. How is that addressed? I don't know that I saw that. I mean, there were some of these that had fences where you had retaining walls, but how do you close? I mean, you're putting an 8-foot lake next to a preschool for maybe 2 days, and there are parents that are going to be very nervous about that. How do you solve that without creating a monstrosity, or how have you done that creatively? I'm assuming those weren't in the drawings. How would you address that?
Well, safety in all these issues is a multifaceted aspect. As a designer or a creator of these facilities, I can only do so much. After that, it becomes responsibility of obviously security and programming and teaching. I live in Lombard, by the way, and I live right next to Pleasant Lane School. Right there, 10 years ago, we had to, because of an addition, create a similar basin right in front of the school, right on North Main, which is 4 feet deep, and it's approximately, I think, 20,000 square feet. And it's not fenced, and it's used there. My kids have gone there. Water stands in there. And I will always point out that it's sort of a, I know what you're seeing in your mind, that you're seeing 5-6 feet of water standing out in front of the park, in front of the school, like Bryan's school. and I can appreciate the concern. But at the same time, on April 18th, we had 4 feet of water on Washington Street in everyone's yard, on the street, the same security issues that occur there. And I know by bringing that onto the site, it becomes now your
our problem,
responsibility.
yeah.
So we can appreciate that. And there's various ways. We can either fence it. If you see that's a problem, we show that, like we have it on Madison, we have it at Jackson, but those fences already existed.
Right.
So I just incorporated that. If you would like to have it in Bryan, I'm sure we can accommodate that on that as well.
Yeah, I'd just be looking for, we can do this as we get down the road.
Right,
but-
work out
but-
those details.
But how do we do that and without putting up a chain link fence, and making it look like a
Right.
prison? Maybe there's some
Yeah.
creative ways, but I think safety is probably the biggest issue we have to solve,
At
assuming
Pleasant
that.
Lane Elementary, they have no fence. They don't see it as a problem. At Downers Grove, we don't have any fence. We have 10-foot depressed area at that one. Some people see it as a safety concern, and we accommodate that by putting fences or figuring out different security ways of doing it. Other times, that's not perceived as a problem.
And that's probably a discussion we have to have with our
Exactly.
constituents as well, just given the nature of the kids that are in the different buildings that you're talking about.
Right.
What
And at
I'm
the
seeing is,
time-
I saw the picture of Washington Park flooded, and it worked great, but it was a lake, and so I think that's something that we have to talk about, and we'll work on that. My second question is probably for you, Jim, is just where's the city in their thinking about funding? From the standpoint that, there's a lot of really interesting concepts that are up here. There's some big dollars that are attached to it. We want to play ball and we want to help. But we're taking time away from, as you can see, many other issues that we have to deal with on the educational side. And I think I would like a comfort level that there's a feasible plan in place being developed along the lines of how we're going to pay for this, because if we're going to start running the meter with lawyers on an intergovernmental agreement and time from our administration and things like that, I don't want to get to the end of the road with a really cool package that works, but then the money's not there. So, where is the city with respect to talking about or starting to put some flesh on the bone around how they're going to find the money for this and what it's going to cost the community to do it?
Well, as you indicated, it's a long-term plan, and getting to Dr. Harrell's comment that, this is a multi-year plan and funded multi-year as well. It's a little chicken and egg in that we're not sure where the school board and the park district board stand as to the feasibility of the projects. So we haven't prioritized anything not knowing that. Once we get a sense of priorities, any project where you say, yes, this one seems to work better than this one, we need more details, then I think we'll have Dr. Burke and his team really get a handle on cost. He's got cost estimates now, but the city's committed to implementing these projects over the long term, whether it's through grants, which we're always pursuing. April 18th, we had many of our elected officials from the state and the federal government out here offering their help. Now's the time that we're going back to them to see if they can help. So grants certainly, and it's going to take some bond issues for the city to make these projects happen.
Thank you.
I had one last question, and Chris asked it. So I think most of my concerns, I just really want to get moving forward. I feel like most of the concerns I have, which everyone has talked about, can be, worked out in the intergovernmental agreement. So I just kind of want to hear then, are we going to, Jim, maybe you can answer this. Where do we go from here? Are we going to decide whether to move forward or not tonight?
I talked to Mayor Morley right before this meeting, and his suggestion was that he and I and Colette Cabeza, the president of the Park District, get together to formulate a plan of how our 3 governmental entities will work together, and we'll move on from there. And we have 3 partners in this, and we need to make sure that all 3 are in, because it sounds like if all 3 aren't in, then we can't solve the problem.
Thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for your consideration. If you have additional questions, please get them to Mr. Pernod, and we'll gladly respond as soon as we can. Thank you.
Emily, one more addition to that. This is clearly going to take a long time, so there will be plenty of time to get our questions answered and formulate questions that none of us have even thought of yet. So,
But at the same time, I just didn't want us to be holding it up. I wanted to know what they were waiting to hear from us. I mean, was it a vote, or is it just, you're going to meet after this? And
yeah, and I'll come back with how, the ideas that the three of us come up with as to how to move forward, whether that is a committee that is formed between the three governmental units to kind of dive into the details, and who's, is it just elected officials? Is it city and school district and park staff as well? How big that's going to be? What the optimal size should be? We'll work on that, come back to our respective boards with a recommendation, and then move forward from there. Sorry, Dr. Harrell?
No problem. I heard you mention the city, the schools, the park. Those are the big three. But I think the other piece in here that has to be included in there are community members, because there's a piece that they have to, they have to do something too. So how do they make sure that they're in that group? So, and I know it was inferred, but I just wanted to make it on the records.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Should we move on to our next topic on our agenda, which is budget discussion?
I'm going to give an update. Okay. Okay, I'll open up on this one. The last meeting we talked about our community presentation, and in the board improvement committee, which is president, the vice president, and secretary, we're finishing, and John, you started this presentation. It's been a group effort, and I said at the last meeting we're about 75% done with our community presentation. I think from the last board improvement committee, you were going to take some new information and try to incorporate that into the slides. And while that's happening, we need to talk about a communication plan, which Margaret brought up at the last meeting. So I guess we should have a kind of an open discussion about how to move forward with our communications. What's our plan for getting out to the community? We kind of need to have a little bit of a launch for this community presentation, and help our community understand our budget issues and why we're coming before them with a presentation. So I guess it's hard to have a open-ended discussion here, but my thought was if we can just get some ideas on moving forward and how to develop a communication plan.
So we've got the presentation that's 75% complete, and we'll add some finishing touches to that, add some information. We'll bring it back to the board improvement committee, make sure the entire board is involved, and then start to increase our audience. Personally, it makes sense to me to start with our PTAs. There's a group of very involved parents who are vocal within their schools. So I think it makes sense to me to start with the presentation of the PTAs. I'm sure after we present it to a couple, we'll have some changes, some questions that we didn't anticipate, and make sure that those are answered within the presentation. And then move beyond there, work with Malia Smith to make sure that the entire Elmhurst community sees the presentation and is involved. These are community schools, so this is a community effort. Go ahead.
And this is an idea, and I'm wondering if we can get almost a generic communication plan in place that kind of talks about the audiences that we're trying to reach, and then the method on how we're going to reach them. And if we can get a generic communication plan in place, and then we can then, for whatever project, we can then just tweak it as it's needed. And I don't know if we could rely on Malia to help us on crafting that generic plan, And then we can just use that as our, I guess, our template for any future communications that come out there.
That makes sense to me.
I wondered if Mr. Pernod thought maybe your superintendent's community advisory committee, some of the members there, I mean, I feel like anyone who was willing to dedicate that much time to be on that committee, maybe, well, number one, they're very educated in, the financial problems facing the district, but also I wonder if maybe they could, I know it's our presentation to kind of give, but maybe they could somehow have ideas or be a part of it. What you thought about that?
Well, I was just going to suggest maybe the first group you review it with is the Superintendent's Computer Advisory Committee. They're the most knowledgeable. They know the information. So even before you take it to PTA, you may want their input to say, how effective is this communication plan? Does it cover some of the areas that you didn't know coming in that we have missed or something like that. So I think that would be a good sounding board. I think we could ask them to come together at a meeting as a group and get their feedback, do the presentation, then get their feedback kind of as a focus group for that presentation. So I think that maybe that's the first group you want to review it with.
I think that's a very good idea. Ms. Bastida?
When you said PTAs, did you mean like the individual PTAs or the PTA council? What did you have in mind, or both?
All of the above, frankly, at every level of our schools. But let's make sure that Malia Smith is intimately involved in the process and in crafting the plan. And I think she's got plenty of expertise that she can lend to this to make sure that this we do it in the right order. Mr. Bloom?
Can I just build off what Margaret said? I think you and I probably come from the same spot, having seen this maybe in our other lives. Is what we're talking about. We've got ideas that are floating. Maybe we should start, or maybe we should do. And I'm used to seeing plans that have that, the different audiences listed, the different methods, the different messages, and having a document that really we can actually all talk about that says, do we have all the groups? What are the ideas? But we can actually coalesce around a plan, which is a real communication plan, which I'm guessing Malia probably knows exactly what I'm talking about because she does this for a living. And so the question is, how do we want to get to that plan? And so can we ask the Board Improvement Committee, it's not just the deck, but can you guys, spearhead that collection, working with Malia to get, I hope I'm not speaking for you too much, Malia, but I'm guessing you have a template or have an idea in your mind about the key issues or the key blanks that we all need to help you fill in, and agreeing on the stakeholders, agreeing on the methods, agreeing on the messages. So if that's the case, can we work together and then put that somewhere and actually bring that back to the board table and agree on it, formally?
So why doesn't the Board Improvement Committee take that on, put a draft, with Malia's help, put a draft plan together, put the finishing touches on the presentation, come back to the board at our next meeting with a tentative plan, at least an outline of one, and then the board can discuss it, give any, the more opinions we have, I think the more complete it'll be. And then take that, our first stop, sounds like it would make sense to make it the Superintendent's Advisory Committee, run all that by them, and then go from there. Does that sound like a reasonable plan to everybody? Sure.
Just to clarify, we don't have a Board Improvement Committee meeting planned before our next board meeting, just a level set here. And also prioritization for Malia's schedule. Yes, we know that we want to move forward. We just have to work out all of those details of timing.
Good, that's a good point. Before I commit us to a deadline, thank you for keeping it sane. So, yeah, we'll figure that out on the committee. All right. Anything else? All right. Next topic.
Yes. We would like to talk a little bit of the review of the ELL plan overall in the district and specifically to Fisher. And obviously, there has been a lot of voiced concern from parents in the community about the plan at Fisher. First of all, I want to thank the parents for coming out and bringing that to our attention. It certainly wasn't intentional on our part not to be good communicators in this process, but obviously there were some steps missed that obviously we have to go back now and present. So, as you know, we put out some communication on Friday, but we want to make sure that we review that with the board and the public again, just to make sure, because obviously, hearing some of the comments tonight, we still have ways to go in this communication plan to make sure at least everybody understands some of the constraints we have, some of the circumstances, why we're moving in the direction we're moving in. Certainly want to hear parent input and community input into that, and that's not to say there are things we can maybe change or tweak, but some of them, obviously we've talked to the board before about what our limitations are in this area. So again, I just want to thank the parents for coming out. It's great input for us to do a better job at the communication in the Fisher community. I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to ask Dr. Johns to do just a brief overview of the EO plan in general, kind of highlighting what we've already put out on Friday, but just to make sure we're highlighting the key pieces of that, because I know there was a lot of material to read, and we just want to make sure people understand what those key concepts are. So, Dr. Johns?
Thank you, Mr. Purnell, and for expressing the same sentiments I feel. To reiterate on some of the comments that were put out last week, it is important to recognize that back in 2009, an understanding was clear in the district that the district was out of compliance with ELL regulations, partly due to inaction over a number of years, and also due to changes in the law, in particular to bilingual education. And additionally, recent research that showed that best practices include giving students as much instruction as in their native language so that they had a solid basis for learning academic content in their early years, knowing that it makes a big difference as they proceed through schools. So a committee was formed back in 2009, and they extended the work that had been done by a couple coordinators prior to 2009. There had been the nucleus of a program started prior to 2009. It had stalled for reasons I'm still not sure of, but they picked up from that spot. Key district leaders, including the principal at Fisher and staff throughout the district, were part of putting together a plan for implementation in the district. As the memo on Friday indicated, this was called Perfect Match. Coming out of this series of meetings, and it was a lengthy set of meetings, very hard deliberative work was completed, but there was a number of changes in the district, meaning that we needed to have more staff trained in English as a second language, but also a recognition that we needed to add more staff who were bilingual. It's a higher level of certification, a higher degree of qualification, because it is necessary for students with a higher level of language need. This plan has been very successful. We added a number of teachers who are English as a second language. We've been reasonably successful in hiring teachers with bilingual background. Most recently, we've been able to hire a number of experienced, truly veteran teachers who are both bilingual and passionate about serving young people. We have bilingual staff, English as a second language staff in all of our buildings. Again, ESL does not mean the same as bilingual. You can be only an English speaker and teach students who are in the English as a second language program. At Madison, I really think we have an exemplar program for delivering services for students who are bilingual. It is really something that we should be proud of. It is something we should showcase as a district, and is an enormously successful program. At this point at Madison, we have teachers who are triple certified. So they're certified in regular education, special education, and are either ESL or bilingually endorsed. So really, like I said, a remarkable program. Now, all of these changes and proposals and a timeline, and not terribly aggressive timeline, was presented to the school board in 2010. And it was presented here to the board with at least a modicum of a timeline at that time. And it was really a plan to address changes for the language learners at that time, with a scale-out plan looking into the future. We are close to that timeline. If anything, in terms of the bilingual component at Fisher, we have some documentation that we found from previous administration that we may actually be a year slower than the plan anticipated. Not only did this plan work to reach compliance with state requirements, but as indicated by one of the parents earlier tonight, it really ties us directly back to the district vision and mission. As you'll recall, it's very clear in the mission that we've chosen to meet the needs of all students and to focus on future success in life, which is critical in some things I'm going to say in a little bit. Additionally, our vision is to be a national leader in teaching children of all backgrounds. Finally, knowing that we are serving a range of students, we have established our key performance indicators last summer that was adopted by the board, not only to serve top-end students, increase the achievement levels of students in the middle, but also to narrow the achievement gaps on key subgroups. And the English language learners is one of the subgroup areas that this district has struggled at in terms of narrowing a gap. And we believe that is because we need to add additional services, primarily making sure that English language learners who have the need of bilingual education are provided that type of training at a time when it's most valuable and important to them. We also know that if you're really going to make change and if you're really going to narrow gap, you want to do it in the early years. You don't want to wait until junior high or middle school when problems start to appear, because it's much harder, it's much more expensive, and the success rate is much, much lower. It's important to understand also, we've been making changes since 2009. These 13, 14 changes are part of the plan. As I was about to say, it's important to understand that the law here for a bilingual teacher means you have to have a set number of students of a specific language before you're required to have a bilingual education program. What distinguishes Fisher from some of the other schools is we have that critical mass number. We have over 20 students, obviously, who have a language background other than English. In this case, it is Spanish. Now, if we had a school that developed a different language, maybe it's Farsi, and had the numbers, we would have to start to develop a bilingual program that would accommodate those children's needs as well. This is part of the Transitional Bilingual Code of the Administrative Code 228 from the state. These children are assessed using the access test. It is a test that's used throughout the state. It is the exit criteria, is part of the exit criteria that we would use for making sure that when students meet a level of proficiency, that they could matriculate out of the program. There is expectation on the state that we continue to monitor them. We have been able to do that in about the past year and a half, been able to create systems that did not previously exist to see how well they're doing throughout our system. Teachers serving in bilingual programs must have a bilingual endorsement, which involves passing a state proficiency test in the target language and an additional methods course pertaining to the delivery of instruction in a language other than English. As I mentioned before, this is a higher level of endorsement than English as a second language. Again, as one of the parents indicated, compliance with the law is not optional, and it's hard for people to understand, but our charter as a school district extends from the ISBE. We have to follow those rules. It is not something that we get to pick and choose from. It is important to note that both the federal government and the state's government, though, recognizing these compliance objectives, provide us with funds and support to help educate these students. So it's not purely out of tax dollars that these students are supported from, but it truly is out of Title III for the English as a second language or the English language learners, and also out of Title I, where we take funds for students who are at risk. We use those funds for a variety of services, not limited to supplemental programs such as tutorial programs, summer school, additional materials in second languages, and also for additional staff. There is ample federal law, as I had mentioned, federal case law, as I mentioned in the report dating back to '74, that supports the rights of students to understand the language of instruction in a public school setting. And I want to expand on this a little bit. By case law, the case law is pretty clear, saying that students have the right to understand the language in which the content is being taught to them. So they have to be able to understand it. In this case, for students who are bilingual and assessed to that degree, it is instruction in their native language. In Illinois, and Illinois may be different than other states, they place a priority on the content delivery to children over other instructional concerns. And there is strong evidence that even though students may do well in elementary school, even without bilingual instruction in their native language, they flounder later in middle school and high school. This is a pattern that exists nationally. This is a pattern that exists in districts of all sorts across the country, and we believe that we have evidence of it occurring in our district, where students who look like they were performing moderately well out of elementary school do what we call a flat line when they reach middle school, and what look like where they might have been at least tracking in parallel to their peers are now falling behind, that their rate of progress slows tremendously, in some cases stops. Research actually is evidence of it receding. So obviously we're no longer narrowing the gap at this point, but the kids are falling behind. Now this phenomenon happens because the students have enough social language and the degree of instruction happening at elementary school that they can kind of keep pace. But the rigors of middle school are much more. And the knowledge, the need for knowledge and instructional language is much greater, that they can't keep up. And they start falling further and further behind because they do not have the instructional language to keep pace. I don't see the problem happening here as much, but you'll see in other communities that this is the early point at which children start to make the decision to drop out. So as children become distant from their peers in academic development, they in many ways become more marginalized and more separate from their peers in academics, with some dire consequences. Now again, in Elmhurst we don't necessarily see a pattern of dropping out yet, but we do see really, truly disappointment in the curve of acquisition of learning in our district. Another problem we recognize is that these students are sometimes misplaced into intervention programs. So while they may have a language acquisition issue, where they're struggling now, they don't have enough instructional language, and they're not keeping pace with their peers, there is a tendency to overplace them in interventions where they don't really belong. Part of that may include placement in special ed. So we know we're putting students in special education who really have language acquisition needs. And this is a double isolation of these students. We're trying to get their English up to pace, but we want them as much as possible into the regular ed environment. The law provides that families can opt out of ELL services. It's important to note that this is not mandatory. And there are not students who are forced to take ELL classes when they are English or native English speakers at home. This is an option that families can take advantage of. Obviously, because of the data that we see from within the district, we feel that this could be detrimental, but we do have some families who have taken this option and have opted out of the ELL program in the past. The District 205 administration, along with the faculty and staff of Conrad Fisher, are committed to providing the best possible instruction to all students. I think that, as has been said tonight, there is deep passion amongst the staff at Fisher to really help all children at Fisher and to do the right thing and to make sure those children grow as the way we all want them to do. Teachers will be meeting over the summer to assure content integration with thematic instruction, recognizing that the law prioritizes academic achievement over social integration. They will also seek to identify opportunities for regular, ongoing integration to the maximum extent possible as permitted under the law. This may include team teaching, guiding instruction to assure students are able to work with other students in grade level or regular coursework. The staff will also continue a discussion of some school climate factors. This is a continuation of the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Systems, that the district really has done some great work on, and Fisher has done some great work on. Additionally, there'll be work on the CHAMPS program. Both the district and the Fisher administration, as said, are committed to ongoing communication with parents. To that end, a parent Q&A forum has been planned for June 25th, so we can answer additional questions. That will be up at Conrad Fisher School, and there should be more communication through Talk 205. David, I think you had some additional kind of myths that you wanted to address.
I just want to make sure that if there are myths or rumors that are out there, that we're addressing those so that people at least have the right information that we're going forward. One of the things that have come up a number of times, both in parents who have appeared before the board and emails that I have received, is the whole question of residency and what requirements are for residency. And I just wanted to revisit that. We really have initially some very strict guidelines on people who are established residency. They are required to give us 3 different pieces of proof that they're residents of Elmhurst District. So a lease alone is not adequate. We may also have to require a utility bill, other documents that prove that they are residents of the district. We also have to have a copy of the child's birth certificate. We have to have a proof of legal custody and guardianship, along with a number of other documents. As a matter of fact, I just got a call last week from new parents coming in who really were questioning why we were so thorough. They were somewhat offended that we were treating new parents with such rigor as establishing residency. So it's a double-edged sword. We want to be thorough. We want to make sure that residents are truly residents of Elmhurst, but if we become very overly aggressive, I think there's a flip side to that too about how people feel they're being treated in Elmhurst by coming in. And according to these parents, we're as strict as any district they have had coming into residency. One of the things, though, that we do not have, and this is a manpower issue, is how do we establish residency on a year-to-year basis once people establish residency? It's a problem for us. We do not have the kind of manpower in the attendance office, in the schools, in central office to do a thorough review every year of all the residency requirements. We have a number of, you can imagine with the number of students we have, what a huge task that would be. We're looking at other options of perhaps doing it in a more streamlined way to do that. We did some things last year that we thought might help us and assist us with, establishing residency at the beginning of the year or not establishing residency. We're going to revisit those and continue that, but it is a cost issue, and with the financial concerns we have right now of the district, it may be something that the board is going to have to wrestle with. How big a priority is it to add manpower, to add more staff in order to track down residency almost on a full-time basis? We do right now hire an investigator when we are called and there's a question about residency for anyone in the school district. We turn that over. There's an investigation that is started. The investigation firm helps us in establish that residency. Board members know we have been in a number of hearings on residency this year. They are very difficult discussions. They take a lot of time. A lot of time legal opinion on both sides is present. But we have really made it try to be as rigorous as possible, and we have pursued back tuition. If we have found that a family has falsified their documents that have come in, we have asked for restitution on past tuition. So we are hoping word gets out that, you just can't come in and give us false documentation and then just walk away if you're caught. We're trying to really put some teeth into it. I know that's been a hard decision for the board at these hearings, but we're going to continue at least with that part as rigorously we can. But again, it's very time-consuming for the administration. We do not have a lot of extra administration, as you know, in this district, and so that's a struggle for us. The other thing that I had heard from parents was that students who are English speakers would be forced to take Spanish. That is not true. We are offering bilingual classes for those students who have not English as their primary language. And as Charles said, those students are tested, evaluated. Those are the students that go in. A student who has English as a primary language is not offered a Spanish option at this point. I think somebody spoke this evening about the dual enrollment program, the dual language program. We have talked about that in concept. We have not done anything with dual language. And so that is much further down the road. If the board even wants to consider pursuing that would be a further discussion. But we do not offer a dual language program right now in the district. If your child speaks English, they will get instruction in English at whatever building they come in. Again, though, as Charles has pointed out, when we have a critical mass of students with a particular language, whether it be Polish Russian, whatever it is, we would have to provide a bilingual program in those schools. And quite frankly, in the next 2 or 3 years, you will probably see other bilingual programs in the school district at other schools, because we are seeing more and more families moving in whose primary language is not English. English is a second language. And again, at that critical mass, when we have 20 or more, then we are obligated to provide that. The other thing that I heard a couple of times was we are doing this for some financial gain. I only wish that was true. As the board knows, there is no financial gain to this. As a matter of fact, it's a financial cost to us. We are staffing at a lower number at Fisher than some of the other schools. We're providing those bilingual programs. We're offering full-day programs. We don't offer full-day kindergarten in the other schools in the district. That's a benefit to the parents at Fisher whose children are eligible for that. And so that's where the Title I federal dollars go to, but there is no financial benefit for the school district in offsetting our salary costs. That's not the reason we did that. As Charles did say, I think the issue is that the district has been out of compliance for a number of years, and we were cited in our most recent audit again for the second time that our program is not up to state standards. And not to beat a dead horse, but that is a concern for us. So if we get it with that audit, the state is flagging us to say that needs to improve. That is why I think this is viewed as an aggressive move by the district. But the other factor was, quite frankly, we knew we were out of compliance. We had to go into compliance. The other thing is we want to keep all of our teachers in the district. We had an opportunity this year, because of no layoffs, that we could do some transfers, come into compliance at Fisher, hire some great bilingual teachers, and still retain the teachers that we had to transfer out of Fisher, the 4 teachers that parents have talked about. I certainly understand the concern of parents of losing good teachers that are going elsewhere, but I just want to make sure parents understand the reason for that. The reason is we had to come into bilingual compliance. We had to have bilingual teachers in some of those classrooms, but at the same time, this year afforded us not to lose those teachers, that we could provide a job for them somewhere in the district. And I thought this was the opportunity to do that, so we didn't have a teacher losing a position, losing a job, and the hardship that goes with that, and still retain those teachers. Not to say they couldn't transfer back to Fisher at some time in the future if populations go up. Again, our kindergarten numbers are down across the district. That is hampering us a little bit in the number of staff we can hire because of those numbers. But we're hoping as we get closer to the new year, we can start adding some of those staff members back in. I also just want to remind the board, too, that one of the key performance indicators for us is special education and the achievement gap that we see with that population, and the ELL population, the achievement gap we're seeing there. And I just want to reiterate what we are seeing. We are seeing achievement gap that's significant in both of those groups. We have an obligation to try to address that. What we have done in the past has not addressed that, because the gap exists, and it's a significant gap for both those populations. So we have an obligation as educators in the district to look at what we're doing on a program standpoint to reduce that achievement gap. When you look at the research about what good programs in ELL contain, they contain bilingual teachers that teach both English and the native language at the same time, improve that in their content area so that when they get to middle school and high school, the achievement gap is not as great as it presently is. But what we're clearly seeing here is an achievement gap, and that should be a concern for all of us as educators and the Board of Education. So we need to have dialogue and conversation with all of the stakeholders about how we're going to reduce that achievement gap. We've had a number of conversations staff-wise with our administrative team, with principals district-wide. I know I have talked with Fisher staff. We've gone to staff meetings with Fisher staff and talked about that and what some of the changes that we're incurring. And so we'll continue to do that. We want to make this program work for all students. We don't want any student disadvantaged by whatever program we put in. It's about meeting the individual needs of students. The challenge is some of the programs are going to look very different than they have in the past. But frankly, they should, because what we've done in the past is not being very effective. The other thing that I just want to, one of the accusations at the last meeting was that we had told Fisher staff, everybody not to talk about this, that it was a big secret. If only I had that power to tell teachers not to talk about anything, it would be great. I don't have that. That was never a discussion. We have had open discussions about this, and we know there's disagreement. Obviously. We want to be open about that. We want to talk about those disagreements and have at least an understanding for both sides of what the issue is, what some of our obligations are, and what are the bigger obligations that we have as a school district overall with Fisher, but with all the schools in the district. And again, Fisher may be the first building, but I think, quite frankly, you're going to have more bilingual, and this is true across the country. As you know, the country's becoming more and more diverse, and the educational system has to respond to that diversity and meet the kids' needs for wherever it's at. And so that is our obligation as a school district. But we certainly don't want to disadvantage any student or take advantage of any student. And the other thing is, it was talked about poverty rate. The poverty rate in the district is increasing. It's 13% going up from there. I think the confusion is at Fisher, the number is 60%, but that's at Fisher only. So the clarification is, district-wide, our poverty rate is going up, but at Fisher it is up to 60%. We're probably going to see, it looks like preliminary numbers, district-wide we're going to be up over 15%, probably moving towards 16. So that has a lot to say about the economy and how people are trying to make ends meet. And again, that's another obligation for us, that at-risk students, students with low income, we also have an obligation to look at their achievement gap also. So again, we're going to be meeting with the Fisher parents on the 25th. I appreciate the emails and our opportunity to try to clarify some of the issues as we move forward.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Should we move on? Okay. Mrs. Ebner?
Okay. I just had a couple of questions that you didn't address, and I heard tonight, so I just wanted to ask about that. Is there a class size difference between is there a regulation on what the class size can be for ELL? I mean, I know there's a number, I don't know what it is, but it's a different class size number for general education versus ELL.
The law stipulates that the EL classes have to be 10% smaller, but we maintain the target size for the non-ELL classes. So the non-ELL classes would be consistent with the rest of the district. And the federal and state government makes up with that by supplementing through title program.
Another issue I heard about is, I know the law, it doesn't think about the segregation part. The law wants the academic, wants that instruction in the native language, and then the segregation, the law doesn't really address that. So, I heard, about anti-bullying policy, like how can we address some of those issues that are the consequence of following the school code?
I don't want to put words into the mouths of legislators or to speculate too liberally what their intent was, but I believe that they are trying to keep a gap or segregation from getting worse as children get older. As their academic differences grow, they're more likely to be segregated from their peers. So I think that is kind of the reason why Illinois has taken a preference on academics over immediately addressing integration issues. In conversation I've had with Principal Bailey, the faculty at the school we've set aside funds from the resources that we have from Title I and III in order to have those conversations. It is something that's best served at the site-based. They know specifically the nature of the problems that they're having. We are fortunate they already have a quality PBIS and CHAMPS program in place. I would speculate that it would be an offshoot of that.
Bear with me, some of the questions that I had you've addressed. So the first one is the bilingual education. What we're saying is we don't have classes where it's only Spanish that's spoken all day long in those classes. Is that true or false?
Those are classes that are taught by bilingual teachers, and they are substantially taught in Spanish. There is English development, obviously, that occurs during it. But those are students whose scores based on access and a few other measures are pretty low. And so functionally beyond, there's marginal utility in teaching English if we're trying to get content across to them. We want to make sure they get the content. The best way to get the content is teaching them in their native language. But yes, the instruction is largely in their native language.
Okay, so bear with me. So we have that going on at Madison School, and we have that right now at Fisher. But we know that our populations are changing at our schools.
The situation going on at Fisher is we're building out because we have a population that's growing through the schools. So we've been probably over the past 3 years, making sure that we were positioning bilingual staff in place in order to be prepared for a growing population of Spanish-speaking students. This year provided us an opportunity because we had some openings in the district so that we wouldn't have to, so that everyone could keep a job and we could make room for seasoned, experienced bilingual teachers.
And do we have that kindergarten through 5th grade at Fisher, or as students, like we see, whatever our population is in kindergarten, we'll see that throughout their 12 years here with us. Is that what we're saying, or?
Well, eventually, we should, based if our numbers hold consistent and or grow, we will have to have a bilingual program, early childhood through 12. We do have programs for bilingual students and ELL students already at York. We have a program that's both in place and growing at Churchville. The program we have at Fisher is most intense at the younger levels. By the time you get to 5th grade, you have a smaller footprint of a program.
Okay. So what we're really looking at is, based on our student outcomes and our student achievement and growth, we know that we've done very well at Fisher over the years, okay? And that's wonderful. And what we're now seeing, though, is as those students then go to the middle school, there's a drop-off. And we think that it might be based on a requirement for bilingual education. So as we are looking at all of our DPIs, and as we're looking at our students, both achievement and growth, we're going to look at what we've traditionally seen, both as those students have been at elementary school, as they go through middle school and high school, to make sure that we're looking at and seeing the results or the outcomes that is supposed to be expected from this compliance. Yes or no?
You're absolutely right.
Okay. So as we see that data, we'll probably be talking about these nuances, yes? Okay. As it relates to residency, Dave, thank you very much for the clarifications. The only last piece that I hope that I can say is, as the community, if they know of residency issues, they bring them to our attention.
Yeah, both community and the building staff, secretaries, everyone usually calls us, says, we suspect there may be a problem with this residency, and that's what tips us off to the investigation. We do not have people roaming the streets looking at where people are being dropped off. Yeah. I mean, again, that's a decision the board could make. You could hire investigators that go through neighborhoods and watch where kids are picking up buses, where cars are being dropped off with kids, all of those things. Again, we don't have the manpower to do that, so we do rely on people who call us either at the secretary or parent level to say, I suspect they're not residents, and we take those and investigate.
As it relates to, as Shannon had indicated and the parents have indicated, we have done very well at all of our schools. We, have some of our elementary schools partnering with Fisher, and the community has been wonderful. and the Fisher community has done great things. Maybe an unintended consequence of the compliance is the bullying or the segregation and all those sorts of things. So we are looking at that maybe unintended consequence and trying to alleviate those issues. Is that what you were indicating, Dr. Johns?
Yeah, that's the conversation that Principal Bailey and I have had, is that if these things are real, that the parents are coming to us, is that this is an area where we need the staff to come together and come up with a remediation plan, just like all the other schools of the district who have PBIS and CHAMPS committees respond to issues at a building level. The same thing needs to take place at Fisher.
And what we might be seeing is, as you had indicated, you'll see those issues in high school or middle school, but now they're maybe being pushed to the elementary level for various reasons, whether you real or not.
I think blurring the issue with compliance and versus a rapidly changing demographic in a community that at the same time is probably undergoing some pretty significant economic stress. As you heard in the fall, we quickly jumped from a low income rate in the 20% up to the 45%. Word is out early, I guess, that we're up to the 60%. So you're seeing a lot happening in a community in a relatively short period of time. And I think we all know that those have impacts on the climate and culture of a building.
Right, okay. And I guess lastly, I just wonder, what our neighboring districts are doing. I'm sure they're undergoing similar issues that they're grappling with. I know that I hear from other, when I'm at other meetings, superintendents saying there's a lot of different perspectives. And you handle it the best that you can for your given community, and you have to look at that and the compliance piece. So with that, I guess I would also, talk about, I think it's great that we're looking at having the June 25th meeting, collaborating with the community as well as the staff to just make sure that we do understand and seek to understand and address the misunderstandings, misperceptions, whatever they happen to be, truly look at, what are the issues and how can we, get back on track, right? And deal with any unintended consequences. We know when we implement things, there's going to be some obstacles, challenges, unintended consequences. It's how do we address them?
I'm just curious what the meeting on the 25th might look like, how it would be organized. I think what was really nice tonight was to hear different points of view coming together, not in a back and forth conversation, but perhaps, more so in this 25th meeting on the 25th, and I'd like to hear how that might be organized.
Quite frankly, I think it's just getting together and hearing the questions and concerns and trying to respond to those. I don't have any formal, I don't want to cut out conversation and say, well, here's a rule and everybody is limited to, it's an opportunity to share, share what people are thinking. We're going to try to respond as best we can. And even then, we may have to come back and say, okay, we don't know an answer to that question. We'll have to come back and respond to that. But I think it's an exchange of ideas and understanding that hopefully both sides will have a better understanding of where each side is coming from. And I don't want to call it sides. I apologize for that. I think it's just how can we deliver the best program we can, given some of the issues that we have, some of the compliance issues we have, some of the direction we have to take overall in the district. It is, again, not just a Fisher issue. And I think when we talk about bullying, I don't want to, strike Fisher as, well, they've got a bullying problem there. I don't believe that's true. I think we have some issues in every building. We do every year, and we're trying, we implemented PBIS, we implemented CHAMPS to try to address those issues. We need to continue to do that. And I don't want to use, any building as, oh, well, they have some issues, so therefore we have lower standards for bullying that. That's not the case. I mean, bullying, we need to be aggressive with wherever it's at, so.
I think this is, the challenges are significant, the changes that have happened to Fisher, and I think it's community-wide, and it's got to be all levels, and I think it's not only the administration and the board, but the community as well, and we've got to work together, and I think an open, direct dialogue, bringing both perspectives and the challenges that we each see from the different perspectives together is going to make us a better community in the end.
First off, I want to thank the administration. I thought that was a very clear articulation of what some of the issues are that we're facing. And a couple of things that were really clear to me that I think stood out was just some perception issues on the difference in a ESL program versus a bilingual versus the dual language program, and really articulating what that is, because I think there was some misperception. I had some confusion, and it sounded like the community had some confusion too on those different issues. Another piece that I thought was just really well articulated was the point about the access test, and the access test being the same test that they have for entering into the system as they do for exit into the system. Because I know in an earlier conversation there was some concern about, this test, it's checking a box and it might not be clear. So it was good to understand that it's more than just checking a box. A key piece and about the flatlining and understanding what that means and the difference in instructional language and social language. And I think what we're all very focused on is that social piece is really very important. And being a part of Fisher, that's what we have really, being able to come together is very important. Also recognizing that we want our students to succeed, all our students to succeed. And while they have the social language, they might not have the instructional language, which helps them to succeed in middle school and high school. And then finally, a key piece that we've talked about here is the integration and finding ways. Fisher is a very different environment. And one of the things that I think Fisher community has come to value is the integration of pieces. So being willing to work with the school to understand how we can make that work, how we can maintain some of the constraints that we are faced with, as well while we're keeping the things that make Fisher beautiful, beautiful. How do we manage both of those? And I think if we're all working together, we can find a way to make that work. And so I am very excited about the June 25th meeting. I hope there was someone that was talking about the Facebook. I hope we put that out there for everyone to come out to that June 25th meeting so we have an opportunity to talk and exchange ideas and come to a very good resolution. So thank you again to the community, and thank you particularly for the administration in covering a difficult, sensitive topic that need to be addressed. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Let's move on to the next subject on our agenda. That is the approval of board meeting minutes for May 29th. Are there any revisions to those minutes as submitted? Then hearing none, we approve those minutes as they stand. Next is board committee reports. The only committee to have met since the last meeting was the Curriculum Instruction Committee, so let me turn it over to Mrs. Ebner.
I don't have the minutes posted. We met last week, so those will be coming tomorrow. But I'll give you a brief overview. We talked about writing in our district, which is the first time that we've talked about that in the 2 years I've been on the committee. So there has been a lot of work for K through 12 writing, trying to create a continuum. And this is one of the areas that when I came onto the board, that's what I heard from the community about writing. How can we improve our writing in the district? So it was very exciting to hear about this report, and more will be coming on this. It's really the beginning. This has been going on since the fall of 2012. Kathleen Liacci has put together a large group committee, 40 members of various stakeholders to discuss what we want out of our students. You know, when they exit our district, what kind of writers do we want them to be? So it's very complex when you're starting at kindergarten. So I don't want to, there's not a whole lot to say about writing. It's just there's going to be a timeline attached to the minutes of starting with fall of 2012 and going through June of this year and the next step. So please read that, and comments can be directed to the committee or Kathleen Liacci, superintendent, and it's good material. The next thing we talked about was what Charles Johns calls longitudinal assessment planning. As a board, we will, thanks. It's a mouthful. Okay, we will need to start talking about this in the future. This is how our kids will be tested. There's a couple of different paths that we can go. There's the PARCC test. There's, of course, we still have the ISAT. There's the MAP testing. There's our own district assessments that are made, our teachers make. So there, in 2016, the teacher evaluation needs to have some kind of value-added measure for students. So right now, we were discussing what testing you would use to put in that evaluation. It's very complex, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation. I mean, there's no clear answer. There's a lot of balls in the air with what a PARCC assessment would look like. We don't even know what that looks like. But Charles, I mean, maybe you can elaborate just a little bit on it.
I don't want to, we're going to hit that at the board retreat, and for word economy on my part, I'll wait until then. You'll get enough.
So we'll be hearing more about our testing system. It'll be an ongoing dialogue. And then that ran right into the retreat, preparing for the retreat. Dr. Johns will have a curriculum, what he calls, unifying picture of where we're going with our curriculum, which is very helpful because it's complex. So we put a lot of pieces together into one document, and it was very useful as a board member to understand curriculum in our district K through 12. So that will be another part of our retreat. That's it.
Any questions for Mrs. Ebner? Hearing none. The next is the superintendent's consent agenda. Are there any items that board members would like removed from the list that spans from items A through J? Mr. McDonough.
I'd like to remove item D, approval to open designated closed session minutes and keep all other closed session minutes closed.
Okay, thank you. I would also like to remove C, approval of revised policy 5:120. So let me just walk through the superintendent's consent agenda quickly. The standard personnel report that we approve every meeting, the standard financial reports, this revised policy of 5:120 ethics. This is be our second reading, and we will adopt this policy at this meeting. The item that Mr. McDonough removed, the approval to open designated closed session minutes. Item E, the approval to authorize destruction of verbatim recording of closed session minutes in compliance with Illinois law. Item F, the approval of recommendation to deny a hazardous crossing. Item G, the approval of a donation to Emerson School. I just want to say thank you to the Emerson PTA, who's donating money to purchase 5 wireless access points, in other words, Wi-Fi access for that building. Item H, the approval of a donation to Edison. And again, thank you to the Edison PTA, who is donating 2 wireless access points for that school. Item I, the approval of a donation to Field School. And again, thank you to the Field PTA, who's donating about $5,500 for iPads in their donation, combined with funding that Field already has, will provide for a full classroom of iPads to be used in instruction. And finally, item J, approval of a donation to Bryan Middle School. And again, thank you to the Bryan PTA, who is donating some money for additional curricular services like funding of field trips, additional books, and other activities, including the expansion of their student response system that allows a student to sit in a classroom with, for the lack of a better term, I'll call a clicker, and give their opinion wirelessly of the answer to a question that the teacher in front of the classroom is proposing. They use these at the presidential debates, and they're expanding the use of these. I think, frankly, that is a instant feedback to understand whether the majority of the students in the room understand the concept, and then also to increase student engagement as the classroom. I think these are a tremendous tool. So thank you to the PTA there. So with all that said, I first need a motion to approve the items that were not removed. And by the way, we removed items C and D. Anyone want to craft that? Thank you, Mr. McDonough.
I am moved that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's consent agenda, items A, B, E, F, G, H, I, and J.
Okay. There is nothing in those that approves the expenditure of money, so all we need is we do not need a roll call vote. So, motion to approve items A, B, E, F, G, H, I, and J by Mr. McDonough, seconded. Oh, I'm sorry.
Jim, you are approving the acceptance of donations. That is a financial issue.
But we're not spending money.
It's any
Okay,
acceptance.
then we need a roll call vote. I am overruled by the Sergeant-at-Arms. Thank you, Mrs. Walsh.
I'm going to first second the motion.
Yes, so what I was saying was moved by Mr. McDonough, seconded by Mrs. Stufen. Mrs. Walsh.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Bastido?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes. That's 7 ayes, no nays. The superintendent's consent agenda minus items C and D passes. So I need two more motions. One for item C, one for item D. Mrs. Stufen.
I'm going to start with C. I move that the Board of Education accept it as a second reading and adoption revisions to policy number 5:120, ethics, which will become effective at the time of its adoption and subsequently be added to the policy manual of the Board of Education, Section 5, personnel.
Do I hear a second for that motion?
Second.
All right. So moved by Mrs. Stufen, seconded by Mr. McDonough, the approval of revised policy 5:120. I removed this. I just wanted to make a comment and make sure that anybody watching this meeting understands. I think this is a tremendous change in our policy to improve customer service for our parents and our students in the district. Our previous policy did not allow any teacher employed by District 205 to tutor for a fee any District 205 student. This policy change allows, with the superintendent's approval, the ability for a District 205 teacher for a fee to tutor a 205 student. Now, under the old system, parents found it very difficult to find qualified tutors that understood the curriculum, that understood the courses. And while the intent here is that your child's classroom teacher would not be tutoring your student, you can certainly find a teacher who is qualified and understands the material, understands the curriculum, and understands precisely what District 205 curriculum is trying to convey to students. So I just think this opens up a realm of new possibilities to parents within the district. And I think the district administration can easily maneuver any pitfalls that clearly might come of this. I just think this is a great change in policy for the district. So that's all I had to say. Is there any other comments? Okay, hearing none. We do not need a roll call vote. So all in favor of Mrs. Stufen's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. And now I need a motion for item D. Mr. McDonough, please.
I move that the Board of Education release the November 15th, 2011, February 28th, 2012, and May 8th, 2012 closed session minutes and keep all other closed session minutes from February 1996 through April 2013 closed.
Mrs. Stufen?
I second that motion.
Okay, moved by Mr. McDonough, seconded by Mrs. Stufen. Any discussion? Mr. McDonough?
Just an explanation that a slight edit needs to be done before January 10th, 2012 will be released, and this was the cleanest way to get that done.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Opposed, say no. Motion carries. All right. Next is action items for the superintendent agenda. First of all, the approval of the resolution approving bank depositories and the approval of a resolution of appointment to the DuPage Area Occupational Education System Board of Directors. Do I have a motion? Or any discussion? Well, first I need a motion. Mr. McDonough, you want to take a shot? Excellent, thank you.
Making a lot of motions today. I move that the Board of Education approve the resolution which approves the bank's savings and loans and investment pools which the district may use as bank depositories for the 2013-2014 school year.
All right, moved by Mr. McDonough, seconded by Mrs. Ebner. It is getting late. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Now, item B. Mrs. Stufen.
I move that the Board of Education appoint Dr. Charles Johns, Assistant Superintendent of Curricular Instruction, to serve as its representative to the DuPage Area Occupational Education System Board of Directors for the 2013-14 school year.
Seconded by Mrs. Bastido. Moved by Mrs. Stufen, seconded by Mrs. Bastido. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. That motion carries. Now, next, upcoming meetings, all of which will occur in the District 205 Center. I'm just confirming that from this list. Yes. So let me run through the list. Thursday, June 13th, will be a special Board of Education meeting, our retreat with Mr. Pernod and his cabinet. That's an annual meeting that we have. That starts at 6 p.m. Tuesday, June 18th, the Finance and Operations Committee will meet at 6:30 p.m. Wednesday, June 19th, will be it's a special Board of Education meeting, and that will be the second half of the board retreat with Mr. Pernod. That starts at 6. Thursday, June 20th, Performance Management Committee meeting starting at 7 p.m. Tuesday, June 25th, Policy Committee meeting at 7 p.m. Wednesday, June 26th, will be a special Board of Education meeting that will mainly be a closed session meeting for the purpose of evaluation of an employee. And Tuesday, July 16th, will be our regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting at 7:30 p.m. in this room. Next on the agenda, I'm sorry, Mr. Bloom? Mr. McDonough, sorry. Thank you.
As the chair of the policy committee, I would like to suggest rescheduling the Tuesday, June 25th meeting to allow board members to attend the forum at Fisher, which I think is a very important issue.
Will you then take care of polling the policy committee or having Mrs. Walsh poll the
find a
policy
new-
committee to find a new date?
It'll be a new skill for me.
And then
Looking
ask
forward to
her,
it.
and then ask Mrs. Walsh to post that new meeting,
I will do
please.
that.
Mr. Bloom.
To John's point, then that meeting's not on this schedule here, and it would have to be posted. Dave, are you planning on posting that?
We'll post it. Yeah,
Okay.
if all the board members are going to attend, that we'll post it as a board meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll have Ellen do that.
Okay. Action items on closed session. Employment of employee. The dismissal of an employee. Who has that? You have that, right? Okay. So let me just say this as a matter of explanation. A recommendation has been made by the administrative to dismiss a support staff employee, Barb Rammel, for insubordination. Is there a motion to adopt the recommendation to dismiss Barb Rammel?
I move that the Board of Education adopt the administrative recommendation to terminate Barbara Rammel effective June 11th, 2013.
Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Mrs. Ebner beat you to it. Moved to terminate Mrs. Barb Rammel, made by Mrs. Bastido, seconded by Mrs. Ebner. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. That motion passes. The second item on coming out of closed session is pending litigation. And as a matter of transparency, let me explain what this forthcoming motion will be about. In fact, can I thank you? In May 2011, Elmhurst School District 205 began an internal audit of over 25 central office support staff positions to assess whether they had been properly classified as exempt from overtime under state and federal law and whether employees may be due overtime wages. The audit carried into the 2011-2012 school year, and due to significant changes in central office administrators at that time. While the audit was underway, two employees, Sue Holler and Mary Caleri, filed a lawsuit against School District 205 in federal court on March 22, 2012, alleging the school district failed to pay wages in violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, the Illinois Minimum Wage Law, and the Illinois Wage Payment and Collection Act. The lawsuit was filed as a class action, and 11 additional current and former employees joined the lawsuit as plaintiffs. To avoid the additional expense, diversion of administrative and board time, delay, and uncertainty of further litigation, the school district participated in a court-supervised settlement conference on January 15, 2013, and a preliminary agreement was reached by all to settle all material aspects of the lawsuit subject to the court's approval. The settlement agreement presented to the board for approval this evening contains the following following primary elements: a maximum gross settlement amount of $300,000, which includes formulaic payments to the plaintiffs and other similarly situated employees, should they choose to make a claim under the agreement. $72,500 payment to the plaintiff's attorneys and costs and expenses of a settlement administrator. Any unclaimed money remaining after all claims have been made will be retained by Elmhurst School District 205. To receive a settlement payment, the current or former employee must agree to fully release and discharge the school district from all claims arising during the relevant time period related in any way to compensation or that could have been raised in the lawsuit. The school district maintains that it properly paid its employees all wages owed, and there is no evidence that it took any action with respect to compensation that was illegal or negligent or otherwise involved in any deliberate, improper conduct or omissions, and the court has made no findings to the contrary. The court must approve the terms of the settlement agreement, and the lawsuit will be dismissed with prejudice. Now, is there a motion to adopt the settlement agreement in the case of Holler and Caleri et al. Versus Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205, case number 12-2103? Mrs. Ebner.
I move that the Board of Education adopt the settlement agreement in the case of Holler and Caleri et al. Versus Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205, case number 12-2103.
Do I have a second for that motion? Mrs. Bastido seconds it. So, motion by Mrs. Ebner, seconded by Mrs. Bastido. Mrs. Walsh, I will need a roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes.
Mrs. Bastido?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes. That motion passes 7 ayes, no nays. Based upon the terms articulated before the vote on the settlement agreement and the reasons previously stated, the board has determined that this agreement is in the best educational and financial interests of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205. Next on our agenda is board communications. Anyone have anything for the board? Hearing none and running out of items on our agenda, I declare this meeting adjourned.